This is your resume? This is a joke, right?
That's not my resume. There's been a mistake.
Yeah. The mistake was you walking in here.
If you just let me...
Let you what? Now get your black ass out before I drag you out. Like the street dog you are.
6 candidates heard every word through that glass door. Not one looked up. Renee Lawson's hands were shaking, but her face gave him nothing. She picked up her bag and walked out without a word. The hallway was quiet. Her heels echoed on the tile. Behind her, Todd Hargrove was still laughing. That laugh! It was the last one he'd ever have in that building. 3 hours earlier, the morning looked nothing like what was coming. Renee Lawson sat in a corner booth at a coffee shop on Broad Street, 6 blocks from Greystone's headquarters. Her laptop was open. A half-finished latte left a ring on the table. The place smelled like roasted beans and warm bread. On screen, Naomi Prescott, her executive assistant, was running through the afternoon schedule. Board meeting's locked in at 2. Derek Stanton will open, introduce you, hand over the gavel. Carl Weber's team prepped the compliance docs. Patricia Alderman signed off her resignation letter yesterday. It's clean. Renee nodded. And the staff? Who knows? Nobody below C-suite. The embargo holds until after the meeting. Once you're introduced to the board, Derek sends the company-wide email at 3. Good. Keep it that way. Renee closed the laptop and picked up her coffee. She was wearing a plain navy blazer, a white blouse, no jewelry, simple flats, no designer bag. She looked like any professional woman on her way to a Tuesday meeting, which was the point. The charcoal suit, the watch, the earrings, all of it was in the car. She'd change before 2, but first she wanted to see the building. Not the version they'd show a new chairwoman, not the polished tour with rehearsed smiles. She wanted to walk in the way any stranger would, through the front door with nothing but her face and her clothes to speak for her. Her phone buzzed. A text from Darnell. Go get him today. Proud of you. She smiled, typed back a heart emoji, dropped the phone in her bag. This was the biggest acquisition of her career. $430 million. 18 months of due diligence, legal negotiations, and late nights. Lawson Capital Partners, the firm she'd built from a 2-person office in D.C., now controlled Greystone Enterprises, a defense logistics contractor with 2,200 employees, government contracts across 4 states. And today, Renee Lawson would sit at the head of its board. She finished her coffee, left a 10 on the table, and drove 6 blocks west. Greystone's headquarters sat on a corporate campus just outside Richmond. 3 stories of tinted glass and limestone. American flag out front, snapping in the late morning wind. A manicured lawn so green it looked artificial. Renee parked in the visitor lot. She didn't know where the executive garage was. She'd never set foot in the building. The entire acquisition had been handled through lawyers, Zoom calls, and wire transfers. This was her first time seeing the place in person. She walked through the front entrance. The lobby was wide and bright. Marble floors so polished you could see your reflection. A row of framed awards lined the far wall. Top Workplace 2021. Diversity Champion 2022. Employer of the Year. On the opposite wall, a banner read, Greystone Enterprises, where everyone belongs. Renee looked around. The reception desk, the glass-walled conference room, the rows of cubicles visible through an open doorway. Every face she saw was white, every single one. The banner suddenly looked like a costume. She walked up to the reception desk. A young woman, blonde, mid-20s, looked up from her screen. Her eyes moved fast. Blazer, no badge, no briefcase, dark skin. Hi there. Are you here for an interview? HR is on the 2nd floor. Renee paused. Actually, But the receptionist had already picked up her phone. Hi, Kathy. There's a walk-in down here for Mr. Hargrove. Okay, great. She hung up and smiled. 2nd floor, room 204. Elevators are on your left. Renee stood there for a moment. She could correct this. One sentence would do it. I'm Renee Lawson. I own this company. But she didn't. Not because she had a plan, not because she wanted to test anyone, but because in 2 seconds flat, that receptionist had looked at her and decided who she was. No questions, no hesitation, just a glance and a verdict. Renee wanted to see how far that verdict would go. She turned left and stepped into the elevator. The elevator doors opened to a hallway that smelled like carpet cleaner and recycled air. A sign on the wall read, Human Resources, Room 204. An arrow pointed left. Renee followed it. The HR waiting area was small. 4 plastic chairs lined up against a beige wall. A water cooler hummed in the corner. A framed poster of a handshake hung above it. 2 hands, 1 black, 1 white, with the words, Stronger Together. 2 other candidates were already sitting there, both white, both younger, late 20s, maybe early 30s. One was reviewing notes on her phone. The other was adjusting his tie. A junior HR staffer, a woman in her 40s with a clipboard, came out of a side door. She smiled at the man in the tie. Brandon, Mr. Hargrove's ready for you. Brandon stood up, buttoned his jacket, and walked in. The whole thing took less than 3 seconds. No waiting, no hesitation. Renee checked the time. 10:32 a.m. She'd arrived at 10:28. 8 minutes later, Brandon walked out. He was smiling. The clipboard woman appeared again. Megan, you're up. The woman with the phone stood and followed her in. Same routine, quick, smooth, professional. Renee waited and waited. 10 minutes, 15, 20. The water cooler gurgled. The hallway was empty now. The clipboard woman walked past Renee twice without making eye contact. The 3rd time, Renee spoke up. Excuse me, I was told to come up here to see Mr. Hargrove. The woman stopped, looked at her clipboard, looked at Renee, frowned slightly, like she was trying to place a name on a list that didn't have one. He's running behind. Just have a seat. She disappeared behind the side door again. 25 minutes now. Brandon and Megan had each been seen within 4 minutes of their scheduled time. Both had been greeted by name. Both had been offered water on the way in. Renee had watched through the side door's narrow window. Nobody offered Renee water. Nobody greeted her by name. Nobody asked if she needed anything. At 10:56, Todd Hargrove's office door opened. He didn't step out. He just leaned his head through the frame and jerked his chin toward her. You, come in. No name, no handshake, no smile. Renee stood, smoothed her blazer, and walked into his office. The room smelled like leather and aftershave. A set of golf clubs leaned against the corner. On the wall behind his desk hung a framed photo of Todd shaking hands with a man in a dark suit, a former Virginia governor. Next to it, a plaque. Greystone Values, Integrity, Excellence, Respect. Todd dropped into his chair. He didn't gesture for Renee to sit. She sat anyway. On his desk, a single piece of paper. A resume. Not hers. It had been placed there by the clipboard woman before Renee walked in. Whose it was, Renee didn't know. But Todd assumed it was hers. He assumed everything. He picked it up, held it between 2 fingers the way you hold something that smells bad, didn't read it, barely glanced at it. So, what makes you think you belong here? His voice was flat, bored, the way someone talks to a person they've already dismissed. Renee kept her hands still on her lap. I have 10 years of experience in operations management, logistics, contract oversight. I'd be happy to walk you through. Walk me through what? Todd tossed the paper back on the desk. I've seen 100 resumes like this. You all come in here with the same lines. Operations, management, oversight. Big words for somebody who probably couldn't run a mailroom. The air in the room tightened. Renee felt it in her chest. Not fear, not surprise, but the kind of stillness that comes right before you make a decision you can't take back. She made hers. She stayed. I'd like you to actually read it, Mr. Hargrove. Todd stared at her. Then his mouth curled, not quite a smile, more like something between amusement and disgust. Read it? He snatched the paper off the desk. "I wouldn't wipe my shoes with this." He ripped it in half, ripped it again. 4 pieces scattered across the desk like confetti. Then he laughed. It wasn't nervous, wasn't awkward. It was loud, from the gut, from the belly, the kind of laugh that fills a room and sucks the air out of it at the same time. The kind that crawls under your skin and nests there. Through the glass door of his office, 6 candidates in the hallway heard every word. Every single one of them. The ripping, the laughing, the silence after. Not one of them moved. Not one of them looked up. Todd leaned forward. The laughter drained from his face like water from a sink. What was left was cold. "Now get your black ass out of my chair before I call security to drag you out like the street dog you are." Renee's hands trembled. Just slightly. Just enough that she pressed her palms flat against her thighs to stop it. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes didn't leave his, but her face gave him nothing. She stood, picked up her bag, pushed the chair back gently. No scraping, no rush, and walked out of Todd Hargrove's office without a single word. The hallway was cold. Her heels clicked on the tile, slow, steady, deliberate. Behind her, through the glass, Todd had already turned back to his computer. He was done. She was forgotten. Just another name he'd never bother to learn. As Renee passed the executive wing on the first floor, a woman stepped out of a side office, mid-40s, tailored cream blouse, reading glasses pushed up into sandy brown hair, a coffee cup in one hand, a folder in the other. Brenda Calloway, Chief Financial Officer. Their eyes met. Brenda saw it, not the details, but the shape of it. A black woman walking out of the HR wing with no escort, no badge, no folder, her jaw tight, her eyes straight ahead. The look of someone who had just been through something and was holding it together by force of will. Brenda knew that look. She'd seen it before. She knew what happened on the second floor. She knew who Todd Hargrove was. She looked at Renee for exactly 1 second. Then she looked away, adjusted her reading glasses, turned toward the elevator, and kept walking. That was it. That was all she gave. Renee reached the lobby. She sat in a chair near the front entrance. The marble floor reflected the overhead lights in long white streaks. The "Where Everyone Belongs" banner hung 10 feet above her head. She pulled out her phone. Her hand was steady now. She dialed Naomi. "Bring the suit and the board file to the main lobby, now." Naomi paused. "You okay? You sound—" "I'm fine. Just get here." She hung up, set the phone on her knee, and stared at the elevator doors, the same ones she'd ridden up 25 minutes ago as a nobody. In less than 3 hours, those same doors would open again, and this time, every person in the building would know her name. Renee sat in that lobby chair for 11 minutes before Todd Hargrove showed up again. She wasn't looking for him. She was looking at the elevator doors, running the math in her head. Board meeting at 2. Naomi 20 minutes out. Enough time to change, review the documents, walk into that room, and do what she came here to do. Then she heard the laugh. The same one. Loud. From the gut. Echoing off the marble floor like a stone dropped in a well. Todd walked out of the elevator with another man. Shorter, heavier, khaki pants, and a gray stone lanyard around his neck. They were mid-conversation, both smiling. Todd was telling a story. Renee couldn't hear all of it, but she caught the tail end. And she actually asked me to read it. Read it. Like I've got time to babysit every walk-in off the street. The other man laughed. "What did you do?" "What do you think I did? Ripped that thing in half right in front of her face." Todd grinned. "Should have seen the look. Like a deer in headlights." They both laughed. The sound bounced off the marble walls. A woman at the reception desk glanced up for half a second, then went back to her screen. Todd headed toward the lobby cafe kiosk. That's when he saw her, Renee, still sitting in the same chair, bag on her lap, face calm. Todd stopped mid-step. His smile didn't drop. It sharpened. "You're still here?" Renee looked up at him, said nothing. Todd walked closer. His colleague hung back near the kiosk, watching but not intervening. Todd stood over Renee, not sitting, not leaning, just standing. The height difference did what it was supposed to do. I thought I made myself clear upstairs. This isn't a shelter. You can't just sit here. I'm waiting for someone. Waiting for someone. Todd repeated it slowly, like he was tasting the words for something rotten. In my lobby, after I already told you to leave. He looked around, checking who was watching. 3 employees at a cluster of tables near the cafe. A security guard by the front door. The receptionist. All within earshot. None of them were going to stop him. He knew that. 18 years in this building had taught him exactly how much he could say and who would stay silent. He turned back to Renee. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. I've been running HR in this building since before you could spell resume. I know who belongs here. I know who walks in and adds value, and I know who walks in and wastes oxygen. He leaned down slightly. Not much. Just enough to make the next words feel like a hand on her shoulder. You people always think showing up is enough. Like the world owes you something just because you breathed today. It doesn't. And I don't. So finish your little wait, and then get out. Because the next time I see you in this building, I'm calling the police. You people. He said it the way you'd say traffic or weather. Casual, ordinary. Like it was just a category, like filing paper into a drawer. 3 employees at the cafe tables heard it. The one closest, a young man in a blue button-down, shifted in his chair. His eyes flicked toward Renee, then down at his sandwich. He didn't move, didn't speak. The security guard by the door adjusted his belt, looked at his shoes, stayed where he was. The receptionist typed something. Her fingers never stopped. Nobody moved. Renee looked up at Todd. Her voice came out even, almost warm. I appreciate your honesty, Mr. Hargrove. I really do. Something about the way she said it made Todd blink. Not the words, the tone. It didn't match. It didn't sound like a woman who'd just been told to leave. It sounded like someone taking a note. He opened his mouth, then closed it, turned around, walked to the kiosk, ordered his coffee. His colleague said something low and they both chuckled again, but this time it was quieter, thinner. They took the elevator back up. The lobby went silent, just the hum of the air conditioning and the soft click of the receptionist's keyboard. Renee didn't move. 60 seconds later, the elevator opened again on the 2nd floor. Todd walked into his office, set his coffee down, and called a colleague in the operations wing. Hey, had one of those interviews this morning. You know the type. Came in like the world owed her a chair. Handled it. The voice on the other end. What did you tell her? Told her what I tell all of them. We don't do handouts. She tried the whole song and dance. 10 years in operations, blah blah. Didn't even look like she could operate a copier. Laughter on both ends. Todd sipped his coffee, leaned back. Then he noticed something. On his desk, the torn pieces of the resume he'd ripped earlier. They'd been sitting there since that morning. He'd tossed 2 pieces in the trash, but 2 had fallen behind his keyboard. He picked one up, flipped it over. One line caught his eye. Lawson Capital Partners, Managing Director. He read it again, frowned, rolled the name around in his head. Lawson Capital, Lawson Capital. Nothing clicked. He shrugged, dropped the piece into the recycling bin with the others. Lawson Capital. Never heard of it. He turned back to his screen and forgot about it in under 10 seconds. Downstairs at 12:43 p.m., Naomi Prescott walked through the front entrance carrying a garment bag over her left arm and a leather portfolio under her right. She spotted Renee immediately, crossed the lobby, sat down next to her. I brought everything. Suit, shoes, the board file, your ID badge. Renee took the garment bag. Where can I change? First floor restroom, end of the east hallway. I checked. It's a single. They walked together. Naomi glanced at Renee's face. Calm, composed, unreadable. But Naomi had worked with this woman for 6 years. She knew the difference between Renee being calm and Renee holding something down. What happened? Not now. Renee. I said not now, Naomi. The restroom was small, white tile, a fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped fly. Renee hung the garment bag on the door hook and unzipped it. She looked at herself in the mirror. Same face, same eyes, same woman who'd sat in Todd Hargrove's chair and been told she wasn't worth the paper her name was printed on. She took off the plain blazer, put on the charcoal suit, tailored, single button, fitted at the shoulders. She clipped on the watch she'd left in the car that morning, fastened a single pair of pearl earrings, slipped into black heels that added 2 inches. The mirror showed someone different now, not a different person, but a different version. The version the world had no choice but to take seriously. She hated that. She hated that the blazer wasn't enough, that the flats weren't enough, that her face and her voice and her 10 years of experience weren't enough. But she didn't have time to hate it right now. She opened the portfolio. Inside, the acquisition agreement, the board appointment letter signed by Patricia Alderman, and a small stack of embossed business cards. She picked one up, gold lettering on black stock. Renee Lawson, chairwoman of the board, Greystone Enterprises. Naomi was waiting outside. "You need anything else?" "No." "You want me to brief Carl Weber before you go in?" Renee looked at her. "No. I want every face in that room to be a genuine reaction." Naomi nodded. She didn't ask again. Renee checked the time. 1:38 p.m., 22 minutes. She held the portfolio against her chest, walked back toward the lobby. Her heels hit the marble with a different sound now, sharper, louder, the kind of rhythm that makes people look up. The receptionist looked up, saw Renee, did a small double take. The same woman from this morning, but not the same at all. Renee didn't stop, didn't explain. She walked straight toward the executive elevator at the far end of the lobby. The security guard stepped aside without being asked. At 1:55 p.m., the 12th floor boardroom of Greystone Enterprises was the quietest room in the building. 12 leather chairs circled an oak table long enough to land a small plane on. Floor-to-ceiling windows lined the south wall, overlooking the corporate campus. The manicured lawn, the parking lot, the American flag snapping in the afternoon wind. Derek Stanton sat at the head of the table, 61 years old, silver hair combed tight, CEO for 9 years. He adjusted his cufflinks the way a man does when he's about to hand something over and wants to look like it was his idea. To his left, Brenda Calloway, coffee cup in front of her, folder closed, eyes on the table. To his right, Carl Weber, head of legal, reading glasses on, pen in hand. The only person in the room who looked like he was actually working. Around the rest of the table, 4 board members, 2 department heads, and the company's outside counsel. A gray-haired woman named Diane Faulkner who billed $600 an hour and never smiled. And at the far end, 2 chairs from the door, Todd Hargrove. He was there for compliance. HR directors attended board transitions to sign off on leadership change documentation. Standard procedure. He'd done it twice before. He sat with his legs crossed, a leather folder unopened in front of him, and the look of a man who believed this meeting had nothing to do with him. Derek cleared his throat. "Thank you all for being here. As you know, the acquisition of Greystone Enterprises by Lawson Capital Partners was finalized 3 weeks ago. Today, we formally complete the board transition." He paused, adjusted his glasses. "Our new chairwoman holds controlling interest in the company. She will oversee all board-level decisions going forward. Patricia Alderman has formally resigned her seat, and the transfer documents have been executed." He looked toward the double doors at the end of the room. "It's my privilege to introduce the new chairwoman of the board of Greystone Enterprises." The doors opened. Renee Lawson walked in, charcoal suit, pearl earrings, leather portfolio in her left hand. Her heels struck the hardwood floor in a rhythm that filled the silence like a heartbeat. She didn't rush, didn't scan the room for approval. She walked the length of that table the way someone walks into a room they already own, because she did. Carl Weber looked up. His pen stopped moving. His eyes went from Renee to Todd and back again. He exhaled slowly through his nose. He understood. Brenda Calloway's hand froze around her coffee cup, her face drained of color. Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once, like someone had pulled a plug. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. Derek Stanton smiled and gestured toward the head of the table. "Ms. Lawson, the floor is yours." Todd didn't react at first. He was looking at his phone under the table, half present, half checked out, the way he always was in meetings that didn't involve him. Then he looked up, and the world stopped. His mouth opened first. Then his eyes caught up, widening, narrowing, widening again, cycling through confusion and recognition like a slot machine that kept landing on the wrong symbol. The woman from the HR office. The resume he ripped apart. The person he told to get her black ass out of his chair. The one he laughed at. The one he called a street dog. The one he stood over in the lobby and told, "You people always think showing up is enough." She was pulling out the chair at the head of the table. She was sitting down. She was opening her portfolio. Todd's face went white. Not pale, white. The color of paper. The color of the resume he'd torn to pieces 4 hours ago. Renee placed the portfolio flat on the table. She looked around the room, every face one by one. She stopped on Todd last. "Thank you, Derek." Her voice was steady, unhurried. The same voice Todd had heard that morning, the one he'd talked over, interrupted, and dismissed. "Before we begin the formal agenda, I'd like to share something that happened in this building earlier today." She reached into the portfolio and pulled out 4 torn pieces of paper. She placed them on the table, carefully, deliberately, the way someone lays down evidence. Every eye in the room locked onto those pieces. "This morning, I arrived at this building for the first time. I walked in through the front entrance. The receptionist looked at me and assumed I was here for a job interview. She sent me to the second floor. To HR. She paused. Let the silence do its work. Mr. Hargrove was kind enough to meet with me." Todd's chair creaked. His hand gripped the armrest. "He didn't ask my name. He didn't read the resume on his desk, which I should note, wasn't even mine. He looked at me, decided what I was, and tore that paper apart in front of my face." She touched one of the torn pieces with her fingertip. "Then he laughed. And then he told me, and I'm quoting, to get my black ass out of his chair before he dragged me out like a street dog." The room didn't breathe. After I left his office, he found me in the lobby and told me, again, in front of multiple employees, that you people always think showing up is enough. She looked directly at Todd, not with anger, not with triumph, with the exact same calm she'd had when he was tearing that paper apart. "Mr. Hargrove, is there anything about that account you'd like to correct?" Todd's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Ms. Lawson, there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't know who you—" "That's the point, Mr. Hargrove." Renee's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "You didn't know who I was, and that's exactly how you treated me." The silence in that boardroom lasted 6 full seconds. It felt like 60. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant snap of the flag outside the window. Derek Stanton sat frozen. His hands were flat on the table, fingers slightly spread like a man bracing for turbulence. He looked at Renee, then at Todd, then back at Renee. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. 9 years as CEO, and he had absolutely nothing. Carl Weber set his pen down, removed his glasses, folded them carefully and placed them on his legal pad. He didn't need to hear another word. He already knew where this was going. Renee let the silence sit for 1 more second. Then she spoke. "Carl, I'm directing a full internal audit of every hiring decision made under Mr. Hargrove's authority over the past 5 years. I want your office to begin before the end of the week. Every resume reviewed, every rejection is documented, every complaint filed, and every complaint buried." Carl nodded once. "Understood, Chairwoman." Todd pushed back from the table. Not standing, just shifting, the way an animal shifts when it realizes the cage door just closed. "Ms. Lawson, I've given 18 years to this company. 18 years. I've built the HR department from the ground up. I've hired hundreds of... And in those 18 years, Renee said, how many resumes did you tear up that we don't know about? Todd's mouth stayed open. No sound came out. How many people sat in your chair and heard what I heard this morning? Still nothing. How many of them walked out of this building and never came back? Not because they weren't qualified, but because you decided what they were before they opened their mouths. Todd's eyes moved around the table, searching, looking for someone, anyone, who would speak for him, who would say, hold on, or let's hear his side, or maybe there's been a misunderstanding. He looked at Derek. Derek studied his cufflinks. He looked at Brenda. Brenda stared at the table so hard she could have burned a hole through it. He looked at Diane Faulkner, the outside counsel. She was writing something in her notepad. She didn't look up. He looked at the department heads, the board members, the men and women he'd shared holiday parties with, golf tournaments with, 18 years of handshakes and hallway small talk with. Not one of them met his eyes. Renee spoke again. Her voice hadn't changed. Same volume, same rhythm, same calm. That was the thing about Renee. She didn't need to raise her voice. The facts did the yelling for her. Mr. Hargrove, you are suspended from your position effective immediately. You will not return to this building until the internal investigation is complete. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings. You have 15 minutes. Todd stood up. His chair rolled back and hit the wall behind him. His hands were shaking. Not the subtle tremor Renee had felt that morning, but a full, visible shake. The kind that starts in the fingers and works its way into the chest. You can't... I can. I just did. 2 security officers appeared at the boardroom door. They didn't enter. They just stood there, hands at their sides, faces neutral, waiting. Todd looked at them. Looked at Renee. Looked at the torn pieces of paper still sitting in the center of the table. He picked up his leather folder, buttoned his jacket with fingers that wouldn't cooperate, and walked out of the boardroom without another word. His footsteps faded down the hallway, uneven, off rhythm, the walk of a man whose legs had stopped trusting the floor. The door closed behind him. Renee turned to Brenda. Miss Calloway. Brenda's head came up slowly. Her face had the look of someone who'd been underwater and just broke the surface, gasping, disoriented, hoping the next breath would make everything clearer. It wouldn't. This morning, you walked through the main lobby while Mr. Hargrove was standing over me. You were 3 feet away. You saw what was happening. You heard what he said. Brenda's voice came out thin, cracked at the edges. I wasn't sure what I was seeing. You're the chief financial officer of a company with 2,200 employees. I wasn't sure is not a standard I'm willing to accept from anyone in leadership. Renee paused. You will be included in the internal review. Your conduct this morning will be documented. Brenda nodded. It was barely a movement, more like a flinch that went the wrong direction. Renee looked at the rest of the table. Every face was still. Every pair of eyes was on her. Some looked shocked. Some looked ashamed. A few looked relieved, like they'd been waiting for someone to say what they couldn't. I want to be clear about something. I didn't acquire this company to clean house. I didn't come here to fire people or settle scores. I came here because I believe in what Greystone can be. She tapped the torn resume pieces with her fingertip. But culture starts at the top. And what happened to me today doesn't happen once. It happens every time someone walks into a room and gets judged before they speak. It happens every time someone sees it and keeps walking. She looked at Brenda when she said that. Brenda looked away. That ends today. Not tomorrow. Not next quarter. Today. She closed her portfolio. Now, let's begin the formal transition. 6 weeks later, the results of the internal audit landed on Renee Lawson's desk like a bomb with a timer that had already gone off. Carl Weber delivered it personally. He walked into her office on the 12th floor, the same office that used to belong to Patricia Alderman, and set a 3-inch binder on the desk. Blue cover, no label, the kind of document that looks ordinary until you open it. It's worse than we thought, Carl said. He didn't sit down. Renee opened the binder. The first page was a summary, 3 paragraphs, single-spaced, with a row of numbers at the bottom that told a story no paragraph ever could. Under Todd Hargrove's 18-year tenure as HR director, black applicants were rejected at 4 times the rate of white applicants with comparable qualifications. 4 times. Not a rounding error. Not a gray area. A pattern so consistent, it could have been drawn with a ruler. The second section was worse. 3 former employees, all black, all hired during brief periods when Todd was on leave and his deputy handled recruiting, had filed internal discrimination complaints after Todd returned and reassigned their roles. All 3 complaints were routed to Todd's office. All 3 were marked, resolved, no action required. The same 4 words copied and pasted like a rubber stamp. 2 of those employees were laid off within 6 months of filing. The 3rd resigned after her job description was quietly rewritten to eliminate every responsibility she'd been hired for. She went from managing a team of 8 to answering phones at a front desk that didn't need staffing. Renee turned the pages slowly. Every page was a name. Every name was a person who walked into Greystone expecting a fair shot and walked out with less than they came in with. "How many total?" she asked. Carl adjusted his glasses. Over 18 years, his office processed roughly 4,000 external applications. Of those, 612 were from black candidates. 41 were hired. That's a 6.7% higher rate compared to 23% for white applicants with equivalent credentials. Renee closed the binder, set both hands flat on the cover, stared at it for a long time. "Send it to the EEOC today." Carl nodded. "I'll have the referral drafted by 5. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission opened a formal investigation within 2 weeks. Todd Hargrove was named individually. Greystone Enterprises was named as an entity. Federal investigators requested and received the full audit binder, all internal complaint records, and 18 years of HR correspondence. 2 of the 3 former employees who'd filed internal complaints agreed to submit formal federal complaints. The 3rd, the woman whose job had been gutted, declined to participate. She told Carl's office she just wanted to move on. She'd already lost enough. Todd hired a private attorney, a man named Gregory Fulton, mid-50s, pinstripe suit, the kind of lawyer who bills by the quarter hour and calls everyone "my client." Fulton's defense strategy was simple: personality conflict, not discrimination. Todd Hargrove was tough on everyone, the argument went. He was blunt, he was direct, he didn't sugarcoat. That wasn't racism, that was management style. The data demolished it. The EEOC investigators didn't care about tone, they cared about numbers. And the numbers told a story that no amount of pinstripe could dress up. 4-to-1 rejection ratio, 3 buried complaints, 2 retaliatory terminations. A pattern spanning nearly 2 decades, documented in the company's own files, signed off by Todd's own hand. The investigation lasted 4 months. The result? A civil consent decree. Todd Hargrove was barred from holding any HR, supervisory, or management role, public or private, for 10 years. He was ordered to pay $85,000 in restitution, split between the 2 former employees who filed federal complaints. His professional certification, the SHR-MSCP, the gold standard in human resources, was formally revoked by the Society for Human Resource Management following a separate ethics review. He didn't go to prison. This wasn't a criminal case. But for a man who had built his entire identity around the title on his door and the power it gave him, the consent decree was its own kind of sentence. Brenda Calloway's outcome arrived quieter. But it arrived. She was not fired. Renee made that decision deliberately. Firing Brenda would have been easy, clean, and satisfying for about 15 minutes. But Renee didn't want satisfaction. She wanted change, and change meant Brenda had to stay and face what she'd allowed. Brenda was formally censured by the board, demoted from chief financial officer to senior finance advisor. Same floor, same building, but no direct reports, no team, no authority. She was required to complete 200 hours of anti-discrimination and bystander intervention training. Her personnel file was updated with a detailed account of the June incident and her documented failure to act. 2 weeks after the demotion, Brenda released a written statement. One paragraph, carefully worded, reviewed by Diane Faulkner before publication. I failed to act when action was required. I witnessed conduct that was harmful and discriminatory, and I chose silence. That choice was wrong. I accept the consequences and commit to doing the work necessary to ensure I never make that choice again. It was lawyered. It was safe. But the admission was on record. And in a company where silence had been the default for 18 years, even a lawyered admission was a crack in the wall. Renee moved fast after that. She established a new Office of Culture and Accountability, reporting directly to the board, not to HR. An outside firm was brought in to rebuild the hiring process from scratch. Blind resume screening was implemented across all departments. Interview panels were restructured, a minimum of 2 members from different departments, with at least 1 person of color on every panel. Within 6 months, the first measurable shifts began to show. Within 12 months, the numbers were undeniable. Workforce diversity at Greystone had increased by 19%. Employee satisfaction scores were up 31%. Retention among employees of color had doubled. 3 of the former employees who had been wrongfully rejected or terminated under Todd's tenure were contacted. All 3 were offered positions. All 3 accepted. A Richmond newspaper ran a feature story, front page of the local business section. The headline read, "Inside Greystone's Culture Overhaul, and the Morning That Started It All." The article didn't name Renee's experience directly. It didn't need to. By then, everyone in Richmond's corporate circle knew the story. The resume, the laughter, the boardroom, Todd Hargrove's life after Greystone unfolded the way gravity works. Slowly at first, then all at once. His wife moved out 3 months after the consent decree was made public. She didn't file for divorce immediately, but she took the dog and the good furniture. His golf club membership lapsed, not canceled, just unpaid, which in that world meant the same thing. He applied to 2 consulting firms. Both rejected him after background checks surfaced the EEOC findings. He applied to a third, a smaller outfit in Norfolk that specialized in manufacturing compliance. They didn't even call him back. Todd Hargrove wasn't a man who lost his job. He was a man who lost the only thing that made him feel like he mattered. For 18 years, his power had come from a chair, a title, and the ability to decide who was worth something and who wasn't. Without those things, there was nothing underneath. Just a man in an empty house, watching his golf clubs collect dust in the corner. 1 year later, Renee Lawson sat at the head of the same boardroom table where she'd laid 4 torn pieces of paper and changed the course of a company. The oak table was the same. The leather chairs were the same. The windows still overlooked the same corporate campus. The flag, the lawn, the parking lot where she'd once parked in the visitor section because she didn't know where else to go. But the room felt different now. The Workplace Excellence plaque still hung on the wall. Renee had considered taking it down. She didn't. She left it there on purpose, not as decoration but as a reminder. A reminder that words on a wall mean nothing if the people beneath them don't live up to them. The Office of Culture and Accountability had just submitted its first annual report. Renee had read every page. Employee satisfaction was up 31%. Retention among employees of color had doubled. For the first time in the company's history, the senior leadership team included 3 people of color, not as tokens, not as quotas, but as people who'd earned their seats and finally had a door that opened when they knocked. Renee was reviewing resumes, real ones, for a vice president of operations hire, 12 candidates, all screened blind, no names, no photos, no demographic markers, just qualifications, just experience, just the work. She paused on one, read it twice, picked up her phone. Send her in. She set the resume down on the table, gently, the way you set down something that matters, and smiled. That evening, Renee drove home to the restored Colonial in Henrico County. Darnell was in the kitchen. The house smelled like garlic and something sweet, his grandmother's cornbread recipe, the one he only made on days he knew Renee needed it. She kissed him on the cheek. set her bag on the counter, walked down the hall to her home office. On the wall, between her law degree from Howard, her MBA from Wharton, and the framed board appointment letter, hung something that didn't match. 4 torn pieces of paper, taped together carefully, mounted behind glass in a simple black frame. The resume was creased and yellowed at the edges now. The tape lines were visible. 4 seams where the pieces met, like scars that had healed but never disappeared. Beneath the frame, a small brass plate, 5 words engraved in clean block letters. They told me I wasn't a fit. Darnell appeared in the doorway, leaned against the frame, looked at the wall. "You're really keeping that thing." It wasn't a question. He'd asked it before. He already knew the answer. Renee looked at the frame, at the tape lines, at the torn edges where Todd Hargrove's hands had ripped her future in half, and laughed about it. "Every time I forget why I do this," she said, "I look at that piece of paper." Darnell nodded, didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. Renee sat down at her desk. The house was quiet. The evening light came through the window in long gold bars, falling across the frame and making the brass plate glow. She looked at it for a long time. Then she opened her laptop and went back to work. Here's what stays with me about this story. The most dangerous person in that building wasn't Todd Hargrove. Todd was loud. Todd was obvious. Todd tore up a resume and laughed about it in front of 6 people. You could see Todd coming from a mile away. The most dangerous person was Brenda Calloway. Brenda saw. Brenda heard. Brenda was 3 feet away when a man stood over a woman in a lobby and said, "You people." And Brenda adjusted her reading glasses, turned around, and stepped into an elevator. That's how discrimination survives. Not because of the people who commit it, but because of the people who watch it happen and decide it's not their problem. Not because of the Todds, but because of the Brendas. Every building has a Todd, but every building has 100 Brendas, and that's the math that keeps the system running. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you saw something wrong? At work, on the street, in a room full of people, and stayed quiet? And what would it take for you to speak up next time? I'm not asking to judge you. I'm asking because I've been Brenda too. We all have. And the only way that changes is if we stop pretending it doesn't happen. If this story hit you, drop a comment. Tell me, have you ever been the person in that chair? Have you ever been the one who walked past? Either way, I want to hear it. Like, subscribe, hit that bell, and I'll see you in the next one.